Welcome back. As we discussed in the previous session, we want to create a stored procedure which executes the CDIS statement, which is very similar to this, except for a couple of differences. Firstly, we want the stored procedure to take into parameters which are a year and month and read data only related to that year and month. That means we need to have a where clause here with the year and month, and also we want to write the output into partitioned folders. So that means you need to have the year and month in the location. And also because we are writing separate tables for each of the partitions. We want to have some kind of naming for the table name as well. So for example, with the suffix of _year_month. So for example, if you are dealing with year 2020 and month 01, the external table statement would look like this. Here. As you can see, we are using the table name with the trip data green _2020-01, and also we've got the location with the partitioned of all the parts, and then we've got the where clause as well. But one thing you may notice here is I'm using the view rather than the table, because as you know, the table doesn't have the partitioned columns, but in the view we introduced them and the columns even exist on the view. That's why we're using the view rather than the table. So if they execute this one, we'll end up having a folder with the year 2020 and month 01. And similarly, when you want to run for the month February 2020, you will pass in the parameters 2020 and 02, and it'll create the separate folders for you as well. So this is the kind of statement we want to construct in our stored procedure and execute that depending on the parameter values being sent. Let's now go ahead and create the stored procedures. So I like to keep my stored procedure separate from the script. So I'm going to create a new subfolder, and I'm calling that as USP, which stands for User Defined Stored Procedures. But you can come up with your own name, and let's click Create, and I'm going to create a new script to hold this whole procedure. Again, I'm going to call that as USP_silver, which is a schema. And then the dataset name, which will be the trip data green. Again, please come up with your own standards, but be consistent. That's all what matters. And now we want to switch to our database, which is the NYC Taxi LDW again. It's very similar to what we did, but I'm going to go with a Go because it's very similar. To views and schemas. Your stored procedure has to be the first transaction within a script. So I'm going to do create. You can also do create or alter. So what happens is if this stored procedure already exists, it'll be altered. Otherwise, it'll be created so you don't have to drop and create like we did before for views and things like that. So let's do create or alter procedure, and then you want to give a procedure name so you can put it in a schema. So I'm going to put stored procedure in this silver schema because it relates to the silver layer, and I'm going to call this with the same name that we've given here. So that would be USP_silver_trip data green, and you need to follow that with the parameter names. As we discussed, we got two parameters year and month, let's declare them. And that's followed by the keyword, as. And then you've got a begin and end to contain the body of your stored procedure. So everything you're going to write for this stored procedure goes between this begin and end. The statement we want to execute here is CDIS statement, as we've seen here. Having said that, we wouldn't want to hardcode the values 2020 and 01, and we want that to be dynamically changed based on the parameters being passed. So the way we achieve that is to construct the CDIS statement in a variable and then execute that. So you can declare variables within stored procedures. The way you do that is to use the command declare, and then you can give the name of the variable and then the data type. So let me create a variable called that creates STMT statement. So that's going to contain the SQL statement or the CDIS statement as a whole. And I'm going to declare that as nvarchamax. While I'm here, I'm also going to create another variable to contain the drop statement. As we said, we're going to create the table and then drop the table because there are going to be many of them. One for each of the partition, and we wouldn't want them. So let me declare that variable as well. So now we've got the two variables to be needed, but let's set the first variable to contain the CDIS statement. So use the keyword set to set the value for a variable in order to save time. I've already constructed the create external table statement here, so I'm going to just paste that and let me walk you through that. I can see here it starts with a create external table, and then we've got the silver dot trip data green, and then you've got the variable. So then we're concatenating the year which goes there and then _month. So what you end up getting will be trip data green underscore 2020 underscore 01. If you're passing in the year and month, that's 2020 and 01. And then we've got the with clause followed by the hard-coded values for the data source. But again, for the location, we'll have to concatenate the year and the month, and similarly then you have the where clause to select the data. We'll also concatenate in the year and the month values there. So this is going to construct a create external table statement which we need to execute. So in order to execute a dynamically constructed SQL statement like this, you can use a stored procedure called sp underscore execute SQL. So let's do that. So we're going to execute this stored procedure, sp underscore execute SQL, and then you just have to pass in the variable here which is going to contain the actual value of the statement. So that's everything you need to do in order to do the create statement. Similarly, in order to do that drop, you will have to set the value to the drop SQL statement. Again, I've already done that, so I'm going to just paste it and talk it through. As you can see, we're setting the drop SQL statement which we declare to the value drop external table, and then they've got their silver.data green, and then you're concatenating the year and the month to that. Again, similar to what we did here. You can simply execute the drop statement. So let me change the create to drop. So with that, we've got the create statement being constructed here and executed there, and then drop statement being constructed here and executed here as well. Just to see what's going on, I'm just going to put a couple of print statements to print the values of the variables so you can see what comes out when we execute that. So I'm going to just simply add that here and here. And with that, be ready with the stored procedure. So let's execute this stored procedure, and that will be created in our database. So that's successfully completed. Now let's execute this stored procedure with some values, and we can see whether that worked. So I've gone back to my to create silver trip data script, and we don't need these anymore. We've talked about them, and I'm going to leave the rest here for you because you may want a reference to this script, and I'll make all of them available in the course material. So I've just come into the out, and we're going to put our new execute statements here. So it's going to be exec. And then silver underscore USP, silver trip data green, and we want to specify the parameters. So let's start with the 2020-01, and we'll test that before we execute it. We'll have to go and drop the folder within our storage account because we've already got the folder as a result of running this script, which created a single Parquet file without partitions and things like that, if you remember. So let me go back to my data hub and then go to the container, and we've got the trip data green folder in our silver folder. So let me delete that. So that's now been deleted. So let me go over to my script here, and we just want to execute it. I'm just going to do it for one of the months just to see whether it works, and then we'll do for the rest of the month. So let me execute that. So that's now being executed. And let's go to the messages and see the print statements we put out. So as you can see here, the variable which we printed was being set with the CDA statement here. So as you can see, we've got the table name with the suffix of underscore year and month. And similarly, we've got the location being updated successfully. And also we've got the where clause as well with the year and the month, which is brilliant, which is what we wanted. And we've got the drop statement as well here. So that means the table was created and dropped. The final thing we want to check is to go to our container and see whether the data exists. So let me refresh the folder here, which is my silver folder, and I've got the trip data green. And as you can see now, instead of having the Parquet files directly in this folder, we've got the year and we've got the month and we've got the Parquet files inside that. So when you run it for the subsequent months, they're going to be put into the appropriate folders as well, and that's exactly what we wanted. We're now confident that our stored procedure works as expected, but there's one little thing I want to talk to you about. As you can see, our output data, which is in the silver trip data green, has got the year and the month partitions, so they are in the folder structure itself. And also then we select the data from a bronze view that also has the year and a month, and we are doing a star. So that means we'll select those as well. So when we create a view for our silver layer, are going to have two lots of year and month, and that's going to be ambiguous. So we wouldn't want to select the year and the month from the bronze, so we can use the year and the month from the partition, 2 columns. So instead of being star, let's just select the columns that we need. So again, I've got the select statement ready, so I'm going to simply paste it here. I've done a couple of little other changes as well. So as you can see, we've had a combination of title case and camel case naming convention within the column names. So I made all of them to have the underscores. As you can see, the vendor ID has gone from vendor with the uppercase, had to vendor underscore ID and a couple of other columns, and I dropped the year and the month. They are not being selected, and we'll use that year and the month from the partition columns so that we can partition prune. So let's execute this so that the stored procedure has been altered with their select statement be retained here with the columns. So I've just done that, and that's successfully completed, and now we can execute this for all of the months rather than just the 2020-01. Let me copy and paste those statements here. And as you can see, we've got the 2020-01 to 12 and then 2021 1 to 6. So we should execute the stored procedure for all of the years and months. As I said, we have hard-coded the values here for the year and the month, but we can create Synapse pipelines to read the incoming data detected by the partition columns and then dynamically send them to this stored procedure so we don't have to hard-code it anything. And then you have new data for example, July 2021, it'll automatically pick that up and then load them into your Silver layer as well as Parquet files. So before we execute it, let's go and delete the folder one more time because we are going to execute it for the first month as well. And let's delete this, and let me come back and just execute the exec statements here, and that should load all of the data from 2020-01 to 2021-06. Okay, that's complete. Now, that took about 16 seconds. Let me look at the messages. Let's go to our folder and see whether the data exists. So I'm in my data hub, and as you can see, we got the trip data green again. And as you can see, that is 2020 and 21 are in here with the Parquet files. And if you go to 2021, you'll see the 6 months as well. So now we have got all of our data from our CSV files being transformed into Parquet, and also they are written into partitioned folders as we expected. So that's the end of this session. I'll see you in the next one.